Hey Nadia, it's good to see you again. We're
Good to
um
see
we're
you.
just kind of continuing our kind of graduate catch up. So we go back a little bit further with Nadia, back in 2009 or
Nine.
10, 2009,
2009.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So way back then, Brewlab was kind of different setup back then, different staff, but the experience itself has prepared you for your kind of journey into the brewing industry.
Yep.
So maybe we could make a start with just giving a bit of an introduction and telling us a bit about yourself.
So I've been working in the craft beer industry since 2008. So I did a year working in a brewery before I went over to Brewlab. Most of that was just washing kegs and cleaning up and pulling pints, but still being around the process and seeing what I liked about brewing. And then when I went over to Brewlab, that gave me a whole kind of more in-depth look at how the brewing process went and how the science behind it worked, and a lot about yeast, which I found really helpful because the brewery that I was working at, we had like open fermenters, and it was probably not a typical way to brew in Australia and not really a typical way to brew around the world anymore. So, but it was really good to see that side of brewing just because it gives you more of an understanding of how yeast works and a lot of workarounds that you can do when you understand the process of fermentation a lot better. So after I'd finished at Brewlab, I went back to the same brewery that I had been working at, and within 3 months, I was lead brewer there. So I don't think that would have been possible without having the tech knowledge behind me.
Great.
So I think it's everyone's equipment's different and everyone does everything slightly different. But when you have that brewing knowledge behind you, you can you can learn it quicker, and you can also come up with different SOPs from a fact finding
Yeah,
place.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I changed a lot of ways things were done straight
yeah.
out of the bat just because of the science that you guys had taught me for sure.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So you were working in Australia for a year and then you came on the Brewlab course.
Yeah.
And what were your next steps after Brewlab?
That was going back to the same
Mhm.
brewery I was working at.
Okay, yeah,
Um, I think I was there for like 2 years working as lead brewer.
hmm.
And then you remember Devon
On the course,
that
yeah,
was at
one of your
Brewlab.
classmates, yeah.
So yeah, Devon moved over to Australia and was working at the brewery there with me. And
Mhm.
then we decided we'll move back to the US.
Yeah.
Um, so after a couple of weeks in the US, I decided I was going to move to
Mhm.
Canada by myself, and that's how that
Fair enough.
relationship went.
All
um,
part of the journey, yeah.
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 So I moved to Canada in 2012.
Hmm.
Yeah, for a brewery in New Brunswick, and it was a brewery that specialized
Right.
in cask ales. But when I got there, I was like, "Holy hell, what are you guys doing?" It's like, "Wow, people are still doing it this way." It was like to give you some example of just how like I don't know outdated the
Yeah.
processes were. They were using compressed air to push the pints at the pub, and I was like, have you heard of like big ass CO2 or anything? They were just like, oh no, this is fine. And they're
I
leaving it
suppose it
on tap
works.
for like they're leaving it on tap for like 2 weeks and stuff. It was just rancid by the end of it. So I was only there for about three months, and it wasn't a great time. It
Hmm.
was people who didn't really have any brewing experience behind them, but weren't prepared to change anything,
Hmm.
not making great beer. And
Okay.
it's kind of disheartening when you spend so much time and so much hard work making a product that at the end of your shift you don't want to drink.
Yeah, that's a shame. Yeah.
So, yeah. And then I moved up to Newfoundland and
Hmm.
went back into hospitality for a little bit and
Yeah.
saw what was out there, and then moved back to Australia to sort out my permanent residency.
Hmm.
And when I was back in Australia, I worked at a couple breweries there. It was really good to go back to Australia and see how much the industry was changing and how big it was getting, because when I first got into the industry in Australia, it's quite small. Yeah, quite hard to like get tap accounts, and people were like, what's this craft beer you're speaking of? And they're like, oh, like you think of the English pale ales now, where people are like, oh, it's so hoppy, and you're like, oh, it's just not even a hoppy beer anymore.
Yeah.
Eventually got my permanent residency all sorted for Canada and came back here and worked at a couple of breweries, and eventually just fell into the old trap of the money. And now I work at Molson Coors.
Well, it's a success story. You've certainly been on a journey across the world.
That's the thing about brewing. There's brewery everywhere, and if you get the experience behind you and the knowledge behind you, you can work pretty much anywhere around the world doing brewing.
Yeah. So the process you learned at Brewlab really is replicated to Australia, the States, and Canada.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, everyone does everything differently, and everyone has different equipment, but it's the same process of going from grain to glass. And once you understand the science behind that, you can catch on a lot quicker, I think.
Yeah. So I suppose the course itself, the diploma that you gained from Brewlab, that's a very practical course. Do you feel that benefited you when you were kind of taking your first steps?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I've worked with brewers who have come straight out of brewing courses where there hasn't been a lot of technical knowledge, and you spend most of your time trying to like teach them pumps, and you're like, no, do that, like cleaning processes. And you can definitely tell when someone's learned brewing from a book rather than being taught how to brew. Yeah.
So out of interest, was craft beer always a passion, or was it something that you kind of discovered a little bit later, or?
I was in my early 20s when I discovered craft beer.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't even really drink beer. Like I was just like, I would drink beer because it was cheap, like at university nights.
Yeah.
But I was working actually in the wine industry when I discovered craft beer. So it was a high-end wine store. We had a few craft beers coming in that were starting up, but I remember there was a Left Blonde that came in, and I'd never even seen the bottle before. And I was like, what is this? And the guy was like, it's beer from Belgium. And I was like, really? And I was like, what's it taste like? He goes, we'll open it up and see. So I opened it up, and like my first taste of Left Blonde, I was like, this is beer? I was like, this is amazing. Wow. Why don't we brew more beer like this?
Yeah. So what are your favorite styles? Have you got favorites, or are you quite broad?
To this day, a lover of Belgian beers. When I go down to the US, I make sure to look up who's making Belgian style beers, because even though everyone hates to hear it, the US, you've like knocked it out of the park when it's come to craft beer, and it's no different for Belgian style beers for them. There's a lot of good breweries down there doing Belgian style beers. But I love my hops, and I love my hoppy IPAs. I still like my English beers.
I was going to say, had a few of them on the course.
I always have soft spot for my porters and my red ales.
Good stuff. I suppose, were there any kind of, well, I was going to say, when you kind of enrolled on the course, do you look back at it fondly, and the experience that you had kind of coming to England to learn the trade and have the experience in the UK?
Oh, definitely. I've been to England a couple of times, but like every typical Australian, I was down in the usual stomping grounds of London, and then we were down in Newquay and Cornwall for a little bit. So never really thought about going to Sunderland, and I don't think many people do.
No, it's a little further north,
Yeah, I remember looking up different courses around the world and trying to see which course was going to fit best for my lifestyle and what I was hoping to do. And at the time, I was looking to open a brewery as well. It's still kind of on my radar, but also nice to make a bit of money for the time being. Brewlab looked like it was going to fit in best in terms of it's a shorter course, and it's a like learn how to do it course rather than just going through books. There was a course in Australia where you could online learn for 2 years, and you do maybe 10 hours a week online learning, and I was like, no, I want to like all at
Yeah.
once kind of
Sure.
immerse myself in it.
Yeah.
But when I found out about Brewlab, and I was like, I'd never even heard of Sunderland. I've heard it. I'd
Hmm.
heard of
Oh,
Newcastle.
understandable.
So
Yeah. Uh-huh.
when I was looking it up, I was like, oh, okay. And I was looking at like pictures online. I'm like, it's quite pretty, isn't it? And then you
Yeah.
get there and you're like, oh, Sunderland's a bit different, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
I'm really, really glad that I got to
Yeah.
live in like Sunderland. If you would visit it,
Hmm.
you may not even remember it type thing. You'd
Yeah.
be like, oh,
Yeah.
I remember like a lighthouse or something. The beach
Yeah.
was nice. But
Yeah.
if you live in Sunderland, you get
Yeah.
to see like the underside of Sunderland. And it's got a
Definitely.
lot of culture to it, and the
Absolutely.
people great. And I just
Yeah.
had a lot of fun living in Sunderland.
Yeah.
Probably too much fun.
Lots of characters in Sunderland. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Friendly characters. You'll always find someone at the bar to chat to.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned maybe in the future looking to set up your own place. Is that something that is a dream or?
Yeah, I always wanted to do a brewery that specialized in Belgian style beers, but now the way the industry has changed, I would really love to have like a farmhouse style brewery and live on a farm with it, like a
Brilliant.
small scale. Back in
Yeah.
the day, you have all these grand ideas of like, and I'm going to build this huge brewery and I'm going to produce so much beer. And after you've been in the industry for so long and you've spent so much time producing so much beer, you're kind of like, oh, it'd just be nice to make like a couple barrels and
Yeah. Yeah.
and bottle it and sell it,
Yeah.
get
Just
people to come in and taste it.
absolutely. Just to
Yeah,
to suit what you want.
no
Yeah.
money, so it's probably a retirement plan at
Exactly.
this point.
Exactly. Suit a lifestyle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess we'll kind of finish the chat with a question. Would you recommend Brewlab to anybody thinking about it?
Absolutely, I already have. You've
Great.
had one guy there from Brazil that I recommended. I
Hmm.
met him here in Newfoundland, and
Hmm.
he wanted to start a brewery. And I said, if you're serious about starting a brewery, then you need to go and do Brewlab, because not only will they teach you how to brew, they will teach you how to set up a brewery as well. And I think
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Raphael,
something
right?
that you
Yeah. Yeah.
don't find in a lot of other courses.
Yeah. I remember him.
Yeah,
Good guy. Good guy.
yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks for your time, Nadia.
No, you're
Good luck
welcome.
with the job and keep going. And maybe
Yeah,
one day
thank.
you'll have that brewery of your own. But many thanks for your time.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Bye.
Bye for now. Bye.